But first, we begin with President Biden's economic agenda. Biden will have to quickly rewrite his policy agenda before a crucial election year. And that's as Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia stunned his fellow Democrats by announcing his opposition to the president's tax and spending package of almost $2 trillion. The White House had spent months lobbying Manchin. Losing his support is really essentially fatal in an evenly split 50-50 Senate where Republicans uniformly oppose the plan. In fact, Goldman Sachs now cut its forecast for U.S. economic growth after Manchin's rejection. It now sees the economy growing 2% in the first quarter. That is down from 3% previously. Democrats are pretty much left with few options for reviving the package. So here to discuss all of this with me now is Bloomberg's national politics editor, Mario Parker. Mario, great to see you after a big weekend. I feel like from the start, we knew that Joe Manchin could play the spoiler role, but the narrative pretty much up until now was that the Democrats would be able to work something out with him. So what do we think happened? Was that narrative always flawed, or did Joe Manchin suddenly have a change of heart?
No, I think you encapsulated it perfectly, Scarlett. Yesterday, just watching Fox News, the interview where Manchin was essentially dropped his bombshell, right? We tuned in just in case there was some sort of news, some sort of tea leaves to be read based off of his direction. But I think that Washington collectively, including the White House, was shocked at how definitively he essentially closed the door on BBB's prospects.
And he says inflation is at the center of it. We know that the Federal Reserve last week pivoted to this stance of rolling back some of its stimulus to address quickening price increases. And the White House has cast this Build Back Better legislation as anti-inflation, something that will bring down prices. Manchin, of course, sees it as something that will accelerate inflation, stoke inflation. Of course, you can find arguments supporting either side, right? I mean, economists will line up one way or another, and no one really will know what the impact is until after the fact, years after the fact. Do we know what exactly Joe Manchin is uncomfortable with? Is it the price tag? Is it something specific within the legislation?
It is, as far as we can tell, based off of his comments yesterday, his statement that was released shortly after his interview. A lot of his concerns are some of the things that he's said over the past 4 or 5 months or so. Concerns about inflation, and saying inflation is not transitory, that it's here to stay. Some of the foreign policy disputes that could kind of ramp up over the coming months as well. So Manchin has said that those are some of his main concerns. Now, again, that puts the White House at a disadvantage because as Americans are concerned about inflation, the White House and the Democratic Party pivoted to saying that the BBB is essentially the panacea to help Americans with these kitchen table issues and the ones that they'll have to campaign on next year for midterm elections.
Yeah, it certainly makes campaigning for midterm elections a lot more problematic. You mentioned, Mario, that Joe Manchin dropped his bombshell on Fox. What's the significance of him doing so in that kind of forum rather than letting the White House know first?
Well, there's some misunderstanding, or it's unclear, rather, as to what type of heads up the Senator Manchin gave the White House. The White House's statement, Jen Psaki, the press secretary's statement, seemed to suggest that they were indeed caught off guard, particularly given some of the comments that they said that Senator Manchin made directly to the president earlier this week, including the agreements on the scope of the package, maybe some disagreements on the price line, but essentially the White House was saying that they were caught off guard, and that Senator Manchin also caught some of his colleagues off guard as well.
Yeah, and you saw that with the reaction overall. I mean, a lot of people are wondering whether Joe Manchin's rejection is simply a negotiating tactic. And maybe Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, sees it that way because he still wants to hold a vote very early in 2022 on the measure. Can you tell us what Schumer is hoping to accomplish with that?
Right, absolutely. Once you saw kind of emotions cool off during the day yesterday, you saw the heated White House statement immediately after the interview, but then cooler heads started to prevail as the evening progressed. You saw Senator Schumer write a Dear Colleague letter saying that he plans to bring the legislation to the floor in the early weeks of 2022. Now, that could be a two-pronged thing, right? So on the one hand, it could be a negotiating tactic to hold out hope that Senator Manchin will make an about-face, vote on maybe a watered-down version of BBB, or at the last option, essentially just shame the senator, right? Essentially just make the senator state his case, make anyone else that is opposed to BBB or supports BBB make their case on the Senate floor as well.
Okay, but so far it's just Joe Manchin in the lonesome in terms of opposing BBB. It's remarkable when you think about how Joe Biden started off 2021 with a $4 trillion economic agenda that included infrastructure. We know that infrastructure has kind of been spun off into its own thing. Is that pretty much a done deal for now? I mean, is that in the bag?
Infrastructure is in the bag, but it creates so many problems for the president. If you recall, the president was able to get his signature infrastructure legislation passed with the help of progressives, with the promise that he could get Senator Joe Manchin and or anyone else that we may not know of publicly who opposes BBB on board, right? So the progressives had this wish list that included everything that's in BBB. And so they voted in good faith on infrastructure with the promise that President Biden would follow through on that. And so now this has ticked off a fresh internal battles between the Democrats, the progressive wing and also the moderate wing.
Yeah, it was a high stakes maneuver that for now is not really working out. What does this all mean for the economic outlook next year, Mario? I mean, Goldman Sachs was very quick to start reducing its forecast. Is the consensus that the U.S. economy is going to suffer because this BBB bill is not going to pass?
Well, you had, as you mentioned, you had the Goldman report out this morning, but then you also, if you look at the markets right now, the markets have been in shambles this morning as well. So they're also very skittish about this. And again, just politically, top of mind, politically and economically, top of mind for voters has been this issue of inflation, rising costs, supply chain issues. And again, the White House essentially put all of its eggs in this BBB basket. And if that doesn't shake out, then that kind of quells the argument that they have some type of solution for, again, these kitchen table issues that many Americans are dealing with right now.